In this video, I'm going to go through 5 ETFs that are designed to help you start investing in the Australian share market. Now, I wanted to make this video because I know when you start investing, it can feel a bit overwhelming. There are over 300 ETFs on the Australian Stock Exchange, and only a few of them are designed to help you invest directly into the Australian share market. So we'll do a side-by-side comparison of these 5 ETFs. We'll look at some of their ethical alternatives if that's something you're interested in. And by the end of the video, you should be in a better place to understand what the differences are in these ETFs. So to pick the actual 5 ETFs that I'm going to go through, I looked at the list of the top 300. I narrowed it down to the 9 that the Australian Stock Exchange says actually focuses on Australian equities, but I further narrowed those ETFs down into just the top 5. And these top 5 are basically based on the biggest 5 in there. And when you look at the funds under management, you'll see what I mean is the top 5 account for quite a large proportion of the money invested in these ETFs, with one very clear standout, VAS, which is the Vanguard product, which is probably the product you see often in terms of forums, blogs, other YouTube videos. So the 5 ETFs we'll be looking at are from Vanguard, BetaShares, State Street, iShares, and VanEck. And I like doing these comparisons in a side-by-side table because if the ETFs are essentially meant to do the same thing, VanEck's a little bit different, but if they're essentially meant to do the same thing, then the best way to look at them is to look at each key feature and to see how they're slightly different from each other. So let me just call out a couple of things in terms of the comparison. The first is the funds under management. There's a clear large ETF in here, which is VAS, and it's got almost more money than the next 4 combined altogether. So it's obvious which one is quite popular in terms of the amount of money that's currently sitting in there, and also in terms of the monthly inflows into that particular ETF is more than all the other ETFs combined as well. Then the next one is fees, and this is where if you look at them on the whole, they're broadly similar in terms of how close they are, except for VanEck, which is a bit higher, and that's probably because of its different design in terms of what it's trying to achieve. It's trying to do equal weighting. But you can see broadly the fees are all the same. In terms of the actual companies invested, this is where you start to see a bit of differentiation. So Vanguard looks to invest in the top 300 companies driven by the S&P ASX 300 index. Then you've got the next 2, State Street and iShares products, which are looking at investing in the top 200 companies driven by the S&P 200 index. Then you've got BetaShares, which is actually doing something very similar to State Street and the iShares product, also looking at top 200 companies, but it's using the selective index provider. Now, remember a while ago, there was an interview done by either the BetaShares team or the selective team where they tried to call out why their index was slightly different and what the benefits of it are. It's worth having a read of that. Then the next thing is the VanEck equal weighting. This is a clear different one, and I wanted to include it in here because the other ETFs run on market cap weighting, meaning the larger the size of the company, the more of your ETF holding will be towards that particular company. Meaning if BHP accounts for a large proportion than say a smaller company, then more of your money will be invested in BHP. Now the VanEck team have put together a bit of documentation where they go through and they try and explain why they believe equal weighted investing is better than market weighted or market cap based investing. Now I know a lot of you will be interested in returns in terms of how much money you're actually making with these ETFs and also what's actually being held in there. In terms of holdings, there's a great website out there for Australians called etftracker.com.au, and you can basically put these ETFs into that dashboard and it will give you a comparison, and you can see straight away most of the ETFs except for the VanEck product, your holdings are going to be very similar. You're going to be a lot in BHP, CBA, and quite a little amount in some of the other smaller companies. The key difference will be VAS will be quite different, where each holding will be a lot smaller because they're trying to distribute your investment across 300 companies instead of 200 companies. So you'll see the proportions are slightly different. And then VanEck will obviously be equal across them. So returns wise, the ETFs are all broadly the same. This is how much money the ETFs are making on average every year for you if we look at the last 3 years. So if you've got VAS and A200 sitting towards the higher end and the other products, especially VanEck, sitting a bit lower, but you might expect a difference because it is trying to do something different. It's trying to go equal weighting versus market cap weighting. So if you are interested in ethical investing with an Australian context. There are some nice alternative investment ETFs that you can use, and I'll list them out here for each of the ETFs that I've just gone through. And a key call out is actually the beta shares product FAIR is actually quite large. It's got $1 billion, so it's obviously quite popular, more so than the Vanguard VETH product. Now, two things to call out when it does come to ethical investing, regardless of whether you're doing it with an Australian focus or international focus. The first is fees, and I'll just pull up a comparison. Sometimes the ethical alternative ETF is a little bit higher priced. It doesn't happen that often. A key call out is the beta shares product, which has 7 times the fee between FAIR and A200. So that's an interesting thing that they've allowed to be in place. But most of the ETF companies will say their ethical product is the same price as their non-ethical product. The other thing to call out is ethical investing is also a little bit wild westy in terms of everyone sort of does their own thing. So sometimes these companies will say they exclude investing in certain areas, or other times they might say they limit investing in certain companies. And the companies that they invest in can vary from big four banks to mining companies, alcohol, tobacco, the kind of usual suspects, adult entertainment. All of these topics, they might say, we're going to try and avoid investing in these with these ethical alternatives, or they might say, we're going to limit our investment in these areas. And someone like FAIR is very clear in calling out that they say, we do not want to invest in the big four banks in Australia, and we do not want to invest in the big mining companies. Whereas the other ETF companies might say, we're a little bit more fluid and flexible on that. So better research required to figure out which is the one you want to do, although it is obvious which one is quite popular in the Australian market, which is FAIR. So which is the best ETF? Did you see ASIC get excited? They were like, he's about to present himself on a platter to us. No one really knows which is the best ETF. That's up to you to decide for your situation. But a couple of things are obvious. VAS seems to be very popular. The Vanguard Australian Shares product, $10 billion in it. It's almost as much as the next 4 ETFs combined together. And in terms of monthly inflows, it seems to get majority of the money in terms of ETF investing every month. So it's got about $240 million a month on average over the last 12 months I calculated, compared to the next few ETFs. It's quite high. The next ETF I would look at is the A200 ETF. It's a little bit newer, more focus on the top 200 companies, lower fee structure, gets about $70 million a month on average into it. So it's obviously next biggest popular one in there. Then the other 3 ETFs, kind of hard to see what's going on there. STW and IOZ do exactly the same thing in terms of what they're trying to focus on. S&P, ASX 200. So I guess you're looking at the lower fee one in there if you wanted to. And then the other ETF is VanEck, which is a bit unique, but you are paying a higher fee structure for it. So you got to figure out, is that what you want to do? This whole equal weighted thing versus market cap weighting, and a bit of research is needed there. So I did do a quick poll to see what's popular in terms of my YouTube subscribers, and please do consider subscribing so you can take part in these kind of polls. And it does seem like VAS is the popular one with a long tail with the other ETFs. So I hope you enjoyed that video, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.